Volume 1, Chapter 2 of The Female American, or The Adventures of Unca Eliza Winkfield. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2. The king's eldest daughter conceives a passion for him, which produces disagreeable consequences, from which he is delivered by. My father had never seen any other of the king's daughters since the day of his deliverance from death, but his dear Unca, till one day, sitting in a wood to shelter himself from the excessive heat of the sun, the king's eldest daughter approached him. As soon as my father saw her, supposing she was one of the king's daughters, he arose to salute her with the profoundest respect. "Winca," she said, "I have long sought for such an opportunity as this. Let us therefore retire further into this wood, that we may converse with more freedom." My father, unsuspecting the occasion of this visit, obeyed, when the princess thus began. "Winca, it is our custom to be silent, or to speak what we think. We are of opinion that nature has given us the same right to declare our love as it has to your sex. Know, Winca, then, that I have seen you, and that the oftener I have seen you, the more I love you. I know my sister loves you, but I am my father's eldest daughter, and as he has no son, whoever married me will be king after his death." My father was so much surprised at this unexpected declaration that he was not able immediately to reply, but as soon as he was a little recovered, he endeavored to excuse himself as well as he could by pleading his love and prior engagement to her sister. But it was in vain. All he could say tended but to provoke her anger. At last, in a rage not to be described, she cried, "If you will not love me, you shall die. My sister shall never enjoy an happiness that I aspire to, nor shall my vengeance be long delayed. This instant shall put a period to your life." However menacing these words were, my father was not greatly alarmed, as they were uttered by an unarmed woman, and which he conceived to be only the effect of passion, and unluckily smiled. "What!" cried she, "do you scorn my love? Deride my power? No, wretch, Aluka can despise love and death at her will." Saying this, she clapped her hands together, and immediately 6 male Indians appeared from behind the trees, where they had stood at some distance, unperceived by him. "Seize that white infidel," cried she, and in an instant all power of defense or flight was equally taken from him. She then took a pomegranate shell out of a kind of pocket that she wore by her side, and going up to a poisonous herb, squeezed the juice of it into it. Then advancing to my father, "Here," said she, "be mine or drink this. I offer you love and death. Make your choice." "I can love none but Unca," replied he. She then ordered 4 of the slaves to hold my father, whilst the 2 others were about to force the poisonous draught into his mouth. "Hold," cried my father. "If I must die, I will drink it myself. I cannot do too much for Unca. She gave me life, and for her sake I will lose it. I drink Unca's health. Her love shall make it sweet." He drank it, and I suppose the ministers of his intended death soon left him, for not long after he woke, as it were from sleep, and found himself in the arms of his dear Unca, when in a languid tone he uttered, "What, do I meet my dear Unca so soon in another world? This was worth dying for." He then sunk again as into a sleep. It seems the princess Unca, having missed my father, arrived just after her sister and the slaves had retired, and saw him sink upon the ground. As she was no stranger to her sister's love for my father, her quick apprehension soon suggested what had happened, and as the Indians are remarkable for their knowledge of poisons, and no less so for their skill in antidotes, she instantly sought, and as quickly found, an herb whose salutary efficacy she was well acquainted with. She immediately squeezed the juice of it into his mouth, which soon reached his stomach and made him eject the poison. But still his eyes were closed. A second dose revived him, and opening his eyes, he uttered those words to the princess just now related. "Heaven be praised," said the princess, "my dear Unca, that I came time enough to save a life dearer to me than my own. Suck more of this juice, and you will be entirely recovered." He did so, and was soon able to get up and walk, but with a slow, tottering pace, like a man whose brain has been hurt by the fumes of wine. The princess perceived his condition, and as they passed along gathered some flowers, the smell of which quickly dispelled the fumes, and fortified his brain so powerfully that he was soon perfectly recovered, and his strength and understanding both entirely restored. Having returned the princess 10,000 thanks for thus giving him life a second time, they walked slowly homewards. During their short walk, my father related to the Princess Unca all that had passed between him and the Princess Iluka, her sister. When he had finished his relation, the princess replied, "I will take effectual care for your security tonight, where my sister will not be able to discover you, and tomorrow I will consult my father what further measures we shall pursue." She then led him through some bypaths of the wood to the hut of an honest Indian, in whom she could confide. Here she left him, with a caution not to stir out till her return next day. Early the next morning, the Princess Unca and her father came to the hut where his daughter had concealed my father. Here a consultation was begun. The king said he could do no more blame his eldest daughter than he did his younger for loving my father. That Iluka had conceived an affection for him at the same time that Unca had, and at the instant that she touched him with her wand, Iluka was about to have done the same. That he highly condemned her intention to poison him, yet as she was tenderly beloved by him, as well as Unca, and his heir, he hoped my father would not desire him to inflict any punishment on her, since the loss of her lover would be a sufficient one. My father frankly declared that his regard for him and his love for Unca were sufficient motives to induce him to forgive her. The king then proposed that, to prevent all future danger, my father and the princess should be immediately married, and that they should both set out instantly for the place of my father's abode, and that, on his account, he would enter into a treaty of friendship with his countrymen, and added that he would give him a portion worthy of a princess. As my father considered marriage as a civil as well as a religious ceremony, and found by their discourse that their matrimonial ceremonies had nothing in them contrary to his own religion, he very readily consented. An Indian priest was sent for, and the ceremony was soon performed. A proper cabin or hut was immediately prepared for the reception of the new married couple, and they were securely guarded to prevent further mischief, till such time as the necessary preparations were made for my father's return, with his bride, to his own plantation. In a few days, everything was ready for their departure. They took an affectionate leave of the old king, and got into a canoe provided for them, attended by several others, in which were several Indian maidens to attend Unca, and male slaves for my father, and a considerable baggage, the contents of which my father was then unacquainted with. Taking the advantage of wind and tide, they in a few hours arrived, without any accident, within a small distance of my father's plantation, to which he was heartily welcomed by his neighbors, who never expected to see him again. They were greatly surprised at his extraordinary adventure, and very glad that it proved the means of a friendship between them and the Indians. My father being again settled with his dear Unca in his own habitation, they were now married, according to the rites of the Church of England, by an English chaplain belonging to one of the men of war that then lay in the harbor. Now they began to examine the presents that the king had made them, and found them to be very valuable, consisting of a great quantity of gold dust and precious stones, and many curiosities peculiar to the Indians. However, my father thought it prudent to conceal the greater part of his riches from the knowledge of his neighbors, not knowing how strong a temptation a display of them might prove, as many of the colony were not only persons of desperate fortunes, but most of them such whose crimes had rendered them obnoxious in their native country. As my father had persuaded his wife to conform to the European dress, he provided for her as well as he could, till he had an opportunity of procuring clothes more suitable to her dignity. He took every opportunity that offered to send part of his riches over to England privately, to be there disposed of, and such goods in return to be sent as he wanted, for it seems he had no inclination to leave his habitation, and the thoughts of it were highly disgusting to the princess. But had his own desires been ever so much for a removal, he would have sacrificed them to those of the princess, whom he passionately loved. My father built him a more elegant house, which was suitably furnished, and his plantation by far the best and largest of any about him. This was a work of time. In the interim, my mother, proving with child from the night of their marriage, was safely delivered of me. I was, a month after, baptized by the name of Unca Eliza. The king, my grandfather, frequently sent a messenger to inquire after his children, who always attended with some present of fruit, flowers, or something more valuable. Thus happily did my father and mother live together, till I was about 6 years old, during which time they never heard the least news about their sister, Aluka. But at this period an Indian brought the news of the old king's death, and that Aluka, still single, was received as queen. A little after, as my father and mother were sitting in the garden, and I playing at their feet, a slave informed them that 2 Indians were come from the Princess Aluka. As soon as they came into the garden, my father was surprised to see that they had each of them a great coat on, contrary to the Indian custom. He had scarce made this reflection before one of them, being come close up to him, pulled a short dagger out of his sleeve and made a push at him, which most probably would have proved mortal, had not he, by a sudden motion, avoided it. At the same instant my mother gave a loud shriek, when my father, turning his eyes, saw her falling with a dagger in her breast, for the other assassin had been too successful in his murderous attempt. My father caught her in his arms and received her dying blood and breath together. The slaves that my mother's shrieks and my cries had brought to us presently seized the 2 murderers. One of them, who dearly loved my mother, drew the dagger out of her breast and plunged it into the heart of him who had assassinated my mother, and was going to have done the same by the other, when my father cried out, as loud as he was able, "Take him alive!" He was instantly bound hand and foot and carried to a place of security. What is human felicity? How often our greatest pleasures procure us the greatest misery. This moment behold a happy couple mutually endearing themselves to each other, whilst the infant offspring of their loves beholds their joys, partakes of, and adds to them. The next, but let the scene sink into darkness. 'Tis too affecting for a daughter's pen to draw. End of chapter 2.